a lot of people are puzzled by Stonehenge in England. Stonehenge is built on Salisbury Plain, and archaeologists couldn't understand why Stonehenge wasn't built on the Marlborough Downs, where the big sarsen stones, the 20 to 30-ton megaliths, were available locally and didn't have to be brought there.
Britain's tallest standing stone does not tower over Salisbury Plain. It hides in a Yorkshire churchyard, 8 meters of battered gritstone, standing taller than anything Stonehenge still holds upright, with possibly as much again buried in holy ground. A Christian church was built beside it. The village itself was named after it, yet nobody can prove who raised it, when, or which rock face it was cut from. So how did Britain lose track of its biggest monolith, the stone that outtowers Stonehenge? Start with a tape measure, because it alone overturns the famed table. In the churchyard of All Saints Church at Rudston, a village in the Yorkshire Wolds, about 10 kilometers inland from Bridlington, stands a slab of grey gritstone 8 meters high. It is 1.75 meters across its widest face, about a meter thick, close to 5 meters around the base, and nobody even squared it properly. The east face runs wider than the west, the north face thicker than the south. Whoever raised it did not pause to make it pretty. They stood it up, and it has outlasted everything since. Here is how it beats the famous competition. Stonehenge's tallest surviving stone, a sarsen archaeologists label Stone 56, measures 8.71 meters from base to tip. That sounds close until you read English Heritage's fine print. 2.13 meters of Stone 56 is buried underground. Above the turf, it reaches about 6.5 meters, while Rudston stands 8. On a straight measurement of what you can actually stand beside, Britain's tallest standing stone is not on Salisbury Plain, and Stonehenge is not the only rival beaten. The Devil's Arrows, 3 vast stones at Boroughbridge elsewhere in Yorkshire, reach roughly 7 meters. Rudston tops everything, and the government says so on paper. The stone was scheduled as an ancient monument in 1935 and listed Grade 1, the highest protection category in England, on the 30th of June 1966. The listing does not hedge. In plain wording, it calls this the largest surviving monolith in the British Isles. Not among the largest. The largest. So why does almost nobody know it? Partly because of where it lives. The stone rises barely 7 meters north of the church chancel, fenced like parish furniture, with gravestones gathered at its feet and the village road sliding past the churchyard wall. You can drive through Rudston, admire a handsome Norman church, and never realize you just passed the biggest prehistoric monolith in the country, and partly because half of it may be out of sight. In the 18th century, a local landowner, Sir William Strickland, dug down beside the stone, and Historic England's scheduling record says his excavation suggested the monolith may extend as deep below ground as its height above. That is an antiquarian report, not modern surveying, so file it as a lead rather than a result. But if Strickland was even roughly right, we are looking at the top half of something far bigger, and the blunted top once rose to a point, maybe nearer 28 feet. Measure Britain's biggest monolith, and everything on record checks out. 8 meters up, apparently 8 down, listed, scheduled, officially unrivaled. What does not check out is the next line on the paperwork, its age, because 5 different sources give it 5 different birthdays spread across 2,000 years of confident guessing. One University of York archaeologist says the safest of those dates is also the least supported. Why would he say that? The stone with 5 birthdays. He would say that because the honest answer is stranger than any of the 5 dates. None was ever measured. Radiocarbon dating, the workhorse of archaeology, only works on things that once lived. Charcoal from a hearth, bone from a grave, an antler pick dropped in a ditch. Bare rock gives you nothing. No laboratory test can tell you when a gritstone slab was stood upright, and nobody has ever dug around this one with modern equipment. So every date you have seen for Rudston is borrowed from its neighbors, and the borrowing has produced wildly different answers. One widely used encyclopedia entry offers 3,500 BC. Guidebooks settle the comfortable consensus around 2,500 BC. A plaque at the stone's own feet suggests roughly 2000 BC. Press coverage of a 2015 survey described it as probably erected around 1600 BC. That is not science arguing over decimals. It is nearly 2,000 years of disagreement between people staring at the same 8 meters of stone. And the excavation record is empty. The last spade near the base belonged to Sir William Strickland in the 1700s. Nothing since. Ask yourself this then, as the birthdays keep colliding. If the firmly dated monuments near the stone belong to two quite different eras, one Neolithic, one Bronze Age, which era would you bet actually raised it? The engineers of the great mounds or the heirs who inherited their valley? That gap is what makes the York verdict so bracing. Dr. Jim Leary is a prehistorian at the University of York who has worked some of England's biggest Neolithic sites, and in 2021, standing in the Rudston Churchyard for the university's own archaeology channel, he said the quiet part aloud. The late Neolithic date, he pointed out, has no actual evidence behind it of any kind. His own reading leans the riskier way. The stone may be early Neolithic, from the same broad age as Brittany's Great Menhirs, which stood between about 4,500 and 4,000 BC. If Leary is right, Rudston predates Stonehenge's first earthwork, around 3000 BC, by centuries. To be fair, this is one serious archaeologist's judgment, not a dig result, and most references still file the stone under late Neolithic or early Bronze Age. The point is not that Leary has won. It is that the argument has no referee, because nobody has produced the data to end it. 5 birthdays, 0 excavations, 1 credentialed heresy. But notice what the whole argument skips. Before you can fight about when the stone arrived, you ought to know where it started, because a proven quarry would pin everything else down. Here is the uncomfortable part. The stone's birthplace has never been tested either. 3 origins are doing the rounds with total confidence. Which of them, if any, has science actually checked? Where does a 40-ton stone grow? None of them. And that is the embarrassment hiding in plain sight. Ask where the stone came from, about its provenance, its original home address, and you collect 3 answers, each repeated with total confidence, none chemically tested. Start with the official version. Historic England's scheduling record notes that the nearest matching gritstone outcrops on the coast at Caton and Cornelian Bays, about 15 kilometers, 10 miles north. Under this theory, Neolithic crews hauled a slab of somewhere between 26 and 40 tons. Estimates vary because nobody knows how much is underground, across miles of chalk valleys, with no wheels and no metal tools, only rope, timber, sweat, and an organizing mind. It would rank among prehistory's great transport feats, resting almost entirely on the rock, looking similar. The site's own plaque tells a different story, pointing inland to the moor grit of the Cleveland Hills behind Whitby. Then comes option 3, the one tourists rarely hear, and historic England floats it too. Ice. A glacier carries a 40-ton boulder as casually as you carry a phone, and a plausible ice flow carved the Forge Valley Gorge near Scarborough and could have parked the slab near Rudston for free, long before anyone thought to raise it. Ordinarily, a 3-way origin fight ends in shrugging, but geology has moved on. In July 2020, a team led by David Nash, a physical geographer at the University of Brighton, published a Science Advances study that cracked exactly this problem for Stonehenge. They scanned all 52 surviving sarsen stones with portable X-ray fluorescence, a handheld device that reads a rock's chemical signature without scratching it, then verified the result with laboratory mass spectrometry on a drill sample archived for decades, Phillips Core 58. Almost every sarsen matched one patch of woodland, westwards near the Marlborough Downs, about 25 kilometers from Stonehenge. So we know where Stonehenge's stones were born, down to a woodland. Come back to Rudston, the tallest of them all, with 3 rival birthplaces argued over for generations. No portable scan, no core sample, no published geochemical study of any kind exists for that gritstone. Britain fingerprinted its most famous stones and has never once carried the instrument down a Yorkshire churchyard path to test its biggest one. The scanner exists, runs off a battery, sedimentary and harms nothing. Glacier, coastal cliffs, or Cleveland Hills, take your pick, because until somebody runs the fingerprint, it stays a three-way guess. But every version leaves a deeper question standing in the field. Why this bend in this valley beside this strange little stream? The stone did not fetch up in a random churchyard. Generations built enormous, deliberate structures aimed at exactly this spot, still visible in the fields. Who spends lifetimes raising 4 monumental avenues pointed at one quiet village? 4 avenues, 1 bend, and a dogleg that should not exist. They built them out of ditches, and 4 of those ditched avenues still surround the village. Archaeologists call them cursus monuments, long enclosures of parallel banks and ditches running across the countryside, raised in the Middle Neolithic. Britain has scattered single examples, one of them famous, on Stonehenge's own plain. Rudston has 4, packed around one bend in one small valley, a concentration with no equal in the country. If you have never heard of them, you are in the same position as the experts. Henry Chapman, an archaeologist at the University of Birmingham, opens his study of the Rudston complex by calling cursus monuments arguably the most enigmatic class of Neolithic landscape monument. That is academic 4. We have the map and cannot read it. The 4 here are known only by letters A, B, C, and D. Cursus A, the giant, is traceable for some mile and a half east of the village, and Historic England notes the monolith appears to stand where 3 of the 4 converge. Then comes the detail that makes the hair lift. The missing ends of cursuses B and D are believed to lie beneath the modern village itself, meaning the churchyard may rest almost exactly on the bullseye, millennia before the church. Chapman's discovery came from Cursus A's strangest feature. It bends. Partway across the valley, the avenue turns in a deliberate dogleg. Using GIS viewshed models, software that maps what a standing walker could actually see, his 2003 Oxford Journal of Archaeology paper showed the bend choreographs the view, deciding which burial mounds appear on the horizon as you walk. A 2005 follow-up in the Proceedings of the Prehistoric Society went further and identified 2 phases. An earlier one, engineered for what he calls somatic experience, designed sensations in the walker's body, including visual surprise at the terminals, and a later one that sits quietly, blended into the land. That deserves a question of its own. Engineers with no metal, no wheels, and no writing bent a 1.5-mile avenue so walkers would see exactly the right mound at exactly the right moment. Were these roads, rituals, or messages for people who would arrive millennia later to read them? None of this proves processions, ceremonies, or purpose. Archaeologists genuinely do not know what a cursus was for. What it proves is intent. This valley was composed, sightline by sightline, over generations around the churchyard bend. Whoever later raised the stone did not choose a pretty clearing. They moved into the middle of a machine that was already ancient. Avenues like those were built to take people somewhere. Follow the stream uphill toward the springs it all seems to radiate from, and you reach the valley's heaviest monument, an enormous burial mound beside the very source of the water. Victorian diggers found dozens of dead inside, and one skull carrying deliberate injuries from both sides dealt at death. Modern laboratories then tested the bones and overturned the easy assumptions. Who were these people who needed burial there? The pilgrim mound and the executed man? The answer starts with a wound. When Victorian antiquarian J.R. Mortimer dug into Duggleby Howe in summer 1890, he expected a chieftain's grave. The mound looked the part, one of Britain's largest round barrows, 38 meters across, still over 6 meters high, just 300 meters from the stream's springs. But most such giants are Bronze Age. This one is Neolithic. What Mortimer found was a burial ground in slow motion, a grave shaft cut 2.7 meters into the chalk, holding a man with a hand-built pot of the Middle Neolithic style called Towthorpe. Above him, over generations, came more bodies, another adult, a child, and a skull with the jaw missing. Mortimer noted a suspicious circular hole in that skull. Modern reassessment upgraded it to blunt force trauma on both sides of the head dealt around the time of death. Execution, or ritual killing, is the current reading. The dead kept coming. Above the filled grave came more burials with serious gifts. An edge-polished flint adze, an antler mace head, arrowheads, a flint knife, polished wafer thin. Higher in the mound went dozens of cremation deposits. Mortimer logged 53. Suspected double remained, putting over 100 people under one mound. For a century, the story froze. Then, from 2006 to 2009, researchers from the universities of Bradford and Vienna, funded by English Heritage, re-examined the survivors. Radiocarbon work by Alex Bayliss, English Heritage's dating specialist, and Alex Gibson of Bradford reset the clock in the Archaeological Journal. Burials began in the 36th or 35th century BC and ran 2 or 3 centuries before any mound existed. The first barrow rose only 500 or 600 years after burial began, which makes this not one man's tomb, but a meeting point. Then the isotope results landed. Isotopes are chemical signatures that water and geology lock into your bones as you grow. Chemically, you are where you drank. Their verdict on the Duggleby dead came back as blunt as the skulls. None were local. Isotopes cannot say why. They record geography, not faith. But it was plainly a destination, pulling people across the country 1,000 years before completion. In 2009, a team led by archaeologist Alison Sheridan opened the giant enclosure around it, first seen from the air in 1971. A gapped ring, 370 meters wide, over 10 hectares, its ditch nearly 3 meters deep. Its quarried chalk, they realized, probably built the mound's final gigantic phase around 2400 to 2300 BCC. The monument was crowned from its own foundation trench. Then, at the start of the 7th century, the most powerful institution in Europe issued standing instructions for pagan holy places. Instructions from 601 you can still read today. So what did it decide to do with Britain's oldest magnet? 13 centuries of custody, one morning of lasers. At Rudston, it did the almost unheard of. It kept the stone. In the year 601, Pope Gregory the Great wrote to a missionary named Mellitus, and Bede preserved the order in his ecclesiastical history. Smash idols if you must, but convert the sacred places, letting people meet the new faith where the old ones stood. Rudston is that policy in mortar. Around 1100, a Norman lord, William Peveril, built All Saints Church barely 7 meters away. A sighting historic England reads as deliberate adoption. Domesday, compiled in 1086, already names the village Rhodestane, the Rude Stone, the Cross Stone. The settlement was named after the monolith long before a church tower rose over it. Then watch the parish tend its heirloom. In 1773, someone capped the weathered crown in lead, Georgian conservation of a pagan relic. Come 1861, a 2,000-pound restoration also raised the churchyard ground around the monolith 5 feet, according to a county history written soon after. The paper trail shows slow burial. The gazetteer of the early 1870s recorded 29 feet above ground. Today's listing says about 26. Generation by generation, the parish kept on burying what it was trying to preserve. So sit with that. When the most powerful institution of the Middle Ages capped this stone, named a village after it, and guarded it for 13 centuries, was that faith, fear of its grip on the people, or evidence that they understood something we have forgotten to record? Custody eventually gave way to instruments. In summer 2015, English Heritage's geospatial imaging team, now part of Historic England, scanned the stone 2 ways. Terrestrial laser scanning, laser pulses building a millimeter-exact surface, and structure from motion photogrammetry, turning photographs into a 3-dimensional model. Tourists had long claimed fossilized dinosaur footprints down one face. Antiquaries had reported cup and ring carvings. Their verdict that September was absolute. No traces of either, only natural weathering and old quarry damage, which leaves a small earthquake in the filing cabinet. The Grade 1 listing, written in 1966 and still online today, records possible cup and ring marks accompanied by scoring on the surface. One arm of the record board, said probably carvings. The other, answering with lasers in 2015, said none. It is no scandal, but it is 50 years of instrument evolution on 2 pages of 1 cabinet, and proof the paperwork never agreed about the stone. That is the thread to pull as we finish. The lasers settled the trivial questions. The footprints nobody serious still believed, while the big ones, where the stone was born, when it rose, who hold it, remain untouched. Each is answerable now with the same handheld tools that pinned Stonehenge's sarsens to one woodland. The churchyard holds Britain's largest monolith. The gate is open. The toolkit exists. Why hasn't anyone walked through? Britain's tallest megalith is not Stonehenge. It is a 40-ton sentinel in a Yorkshire churchyard, officially the largest monolith in the British Isles, drawing Stone Age pilgrims across the country, while science has never dug it, dated it, or fingerprinted its rock. So should that fingerprint finally be taken? And whose origin story gets your vote? Tell us below.